and then suddenly you're finished. Well, at least with the third draft. I have to say I'm a bit exhausted. The uh, the final part, by design, was finished more rapidly. I'd put the more difficult strategies in the front, and once I'd managed to make it through those first three, I realized that in the course of doing that, I'd finished a lot of the others as well. So that was kind of a happy surprise. But these drafts are like mini marathons. It's probably even been a bit of a marathon for you to even listen to these brief descriptions of what it's like to proceed with something that's harrowing, at least to me, and and slowly, bit by bit, get through it. And I guess that's the celebratory moment here, at least for me, is that what seemed so impossible at the outset is now complete. Um, the the next step will be what I'm calling the fourth draft. It's really not. It's about sort of setting up the design parameters. This will not be the conclusive designing moment for the book, but it will refine, in many ways, sort of the limitations that are put on the page and on the text. So it really is about discovering the trim size, the leading, the fonts, how that all is going to work, all of which has been shaped um, constantly throughout this process, but now will be a little formalized, though I don't intend to spend much time on it, perhaps a couple of weeks, perhaps only a week, and and then I will commence with the fifth draft, and that will be the draft that my closest readers and my editor will get to see. And unfortunately, this exercise in putting these little clips up is coming to an end now. Um, uh, the the next the next you know set of drafts, I fear, will be more hidden. I can't say why that is. I had thought for a while to kind of include that process as well, but I realize in finishing the third draft that something changed in me. And I think that's the thing about these long haul projects. For anyone who's invested in such trials, is that the process not only brings forth something that wasn't there to begin with, um, but it also changes the one who is bringing that creation into the world. And I wouldn't dare say how I feel I'm changed, uh, but my outlook has shifted, my perspectives have shifted. Um, the clarity in some areas seems sharper, which I think is probably the result of such continuous focus that when you pull back, you're able to see more gently everything else. Um, and and I know that's not saying a lot, because the specificity of the project is at present invisible to you. Uh, and whether or not these will be interesting to revisit once you've actually, looked at the book, read it, and taken a moment to understand what it does, um, then perhaps these moments where I sit here and think aloud about what has just been done will um, will have more specificity to it. The The book, though, is a tangible journey for myself, and and we often bequeath such journeys with this sort of aura of goodness and full of thrills and if completed, laurels for achieving that end. Uh, but I think some journeys also, inflict a cost, and I'm not really sure how to define what that cost is, but something has been paid out here, and who knows? Maybe that's what makes me recognize that this book counts. Um, as I've said before, it's a western, and it involves Utah, where I spent my early years and went to high school there. Um, there have been a number of questions um, about whether or not this was a continuation of the familiar. And I hesitate to give it a categorical no, because although those characters will not appear here for the most part, and those themes um, or those plot lines won't appear, there it's impossible for the amount of time and thought that I spent conceiving that 27 volume experience, that impossible that that none of it will will reside in this book. And it's a little funny to me, because I felt when I was starting out writing this western that it would be far from everything, and yet somehow those themes are inescapable. So even if they look vastly different and move at a different pace, um, there is still something about that quest in the familiar, and everything that I learned in the course of writing it, um, and perhaps what you experienced reading it, that comes to some sort of, I guess, intermediate conclusion in this book. Um, but there is still that fifth draft awaiting, and I think it would be unfair to describe it as merely polishing the existing manuscript. There is still a performance that's required, and that is actually the thrill of writing. That is the thrill of sitting down with something that, while familiar, will still, in those minutes and hours that I spend with it almost every day, suddenly demand participation, demand action, um, demand communion. And in that, there are always new revelations. And so I'm excited by what awaits. Uh, and and I want to thank you for taking a moment um, to hear what's going on. And I my my hope is that for some of you who are involved in these long projects, um, that this will serve in some small way to buttress your faith in yourself and carry on. Um, the takeaway is that these these efforts are hard, and they are challenging, and they shape you and reshape you as you are shaping and reshaping what you're working on. And there is a price to be paid, but the but the price is what makes the reading worth it, and I think that's what matters. So in the end, the book that you will have is not something that had escaped the bonds of time through uh, tragically, you know, uh, tragically dazzling algorithms and processing speeds that can, you know, generate texts and stories in a flash. That that time is still the ingredient that is required for projects of merit, and and that is not to prescribe any kind of future path for this book, but I know that what's in it represents fairly um, an immense amount of time, labor, and and most of all love. And it is maybe that commitment to that love, which may be at the heart of love, commitment, that fastening to what must be carried. Um, Maybe that will serve others.